Craig Bongelli, welcome to the podcast. I would say world-renowned strength and conditioning coach. You've been a fighter. You've also been pro strongman.
Have been, yes.
Yeah, and you've trained some high-level athletes. Trained a long time at Westside with Louis, and now coach on it.
I do.
Yeah. Give us a little bit more about who you are and what you've done.
So in the realm of what we're talking about, I started out as a skinny 17-year-old kid. I was 150 pounds at the start of my 17th year. And in Canada, where I grew up, you have to complete 40 hours of volunteer experience to graduate high school. And I was not on track to graduating or just barely graduating. And
us both.
Yeah.
There's a table full of dummies right here.
Right.
Just proving everybody wrong.
Agreed. And I had a history teacher who I loved, and she was an organizer at a Highland Games just outside the city. It's like, listen, come for the weekend. You're going to work the heavy events where they flip telephone poles, throw rocks. You're just going to run weights back and forth. And you do that for the weekend. I'll give you your 40 hours. Don't sweat it. So I show up, and I meet Scotland's strongest man. So I'm 6'1", probably at 17. He's 6'2", 270, covered in tattoos. And I felt like I had been hit by lightning. Like, I've never seen a man before. Yeah. I'm like, this is the craziest. I have to be like this guy. Yeah. So I called my boxing coach the Monday morning after the weekend, quit boxing, which I'd been doing for years. Like, everything about my athletic life had been martial arts and combat sports until that point. Quit boxing, like, I'm going to be a pro strongman. Started reading everything I could find, started eating everything I could get my hands on, started trying to figure out how to lift weights. 5 years later, I was 300 pounds, so doubled my body weight in 5 years. Was starting to compete at the top level amateur contests in Canada, and eventually ended up at 320, in the 320s somewhere, at 6'2", as a pro strongman. But through that adventure, through trying to figure out how to become that, I ended up with a variety of mentors who were some of the greatest ever. I was very lucky with the mentors I found who taught me. And to be honest, I had no career aspirations of being involved in strength sports. But I was bouncing, I was working labor jobs, I was doing whatever. And I'd go to the gym and I'd listen to these personal trainers giving their clients advice. Oh, these people are stupid.
That's so true.
Yeah, like, they're really bad. They're really bad at what they do. And like,
that's how I always felt when I was training clients, and you just see people just doing like shit on BOSU balls. And the main thing was no one was ever progressing.
Nobody even knows what's going on. Like, they're getting paid. I thought they were getting paid $60 an hour. Yeah. Found out the gym was getting $60. But to me, I'm like, I'm getting in fights for $12 an hour all night long at this crappy bar downtown. What am I doing? So I started as a personal trainer, ended up opening my own gym, which I ran for just over a decade in Canada. Lil's, named after my dog Lily.
That's a great way to name a gym.
It was perfect. But yeah, that's how I got into this as a profession. At first, I was like, I'm broke. I'm getting in fights for very little money. And I'm watching idiots make what I think is great money at the time. Coach people at the gym. I'm like, cool, I'll do that instead.
Unbeknownst to you, they're actually getting $10 an hour.
Yeah, it was a big surprise.
Yeah.
But at least I didn't have to get into fights with drunk people anymore.
Oh, yeah.
That's a plus.
It was a win.
What was, this is always most people's questions that, you were what, 160?
150.
Yeah, that's what I was curious about. You were 150 at 6'1".
Yeah.
And then tell us the bulking secrets.
The bulking.
Like, what worked for you? Like, walk us through how you decided, okay, I'm going to start eating. How did you start eating, and what like actually started to really push those numbers? Because a lot of guys think they're eating a lot and they have different strategies, but someone who went from that to 300 to 320, you know what you're talking about.
So there's a couple things that help me. One is my tolerance for discomfort and my stubbornness to be able to fail or struggle and then get up the next day with unaffected enthusiasm was key, because it's horrible. Achieving a high result or a drastic result in anything is horrible. Most of it's going to be awful. So every day I felt awful, but I was willing to accept that I was going to feel awful to achieve my goal.
From what? The eating?
From the
nonstop
absolutely.
eating. Okay.
But I really weighed out. I feel terrible about myself because I'm not this 300-pound professional strongman, and that's more painful to me than how the eating felt. But in terms of how I figured out the strategies to bulk, I found this old website that archived lifting and nutrition articles from basically as early as they could find them, like 1920s, 1930s, all the way up into the 80s. And I read all of them. So I'd read about what guys were doing to bulk up in the 40s and the 50s and the 60s. And it was just mountains of food. I was like, cool. Well, I'm going to try and eat as much of that as I can. And I'm going to watch the scale. And if the scale doesn't move, I'm going to add food to it. And I just continually did that. But if you do the math on it, 150 pounds over 5 years isn't a crazy rate. Like most people underestimate, I think in all things in life, what small incremental improvements add up to over the long run. Because when you hear that, people see you in 5 years and you've doubled in size. That seems insane, almost impossible. But if you actually do the math on the weekly weight gain, it wasn't crazy. Yeah. The crazy part was I gained that amount on average every week for 5 years straight. Yeah. And that's what equated to an insane result. These guys are like, I'm going to get huge. And it's like 3 weeks later, and they're like, why aren't I huge yet? Like, if you try to get huge in 5 years, in 3 years, even in 2 years, you'll be way better off. But understand you're going to be very uncomfortable for a very long period of time. And that's the deal. But it's a small increase every week and just being diligent with the scale. Like, I need to be 300 pounds. Well, first, I wanted to be 175. And then I thought 200. And every time I thought, I'm going to be huge. At 170, I'm going to be huge. And then I got to 170. I'm like, I'm not huge yet. Like, maybe I'll be huge at 200 pounds. And then I chase that. Like, okay, it's got to be 225. Got to be 250. And then eventually, God damn it. Like,
do you think that's why guys start to give up on that? Because they feel like, oh, at 175, I'll be huge. And they get to 175. Not only are they not huge, they just have a beer gut now. Even though it's not from beer, they just have a gut. And they're like, well, fuck, that sucks. And then they just revert back.
I think there's a couple different things. I think, one, people do exactly what you're talking about. They do a bad job. Like, they bulk super sloppy. And they're like, cool, I look like a sumo wrestler. This is worse. I think the other thing, though, is I think very few people want things. I think a lot of people want to want things.
Lowercase W want.
Yeah. They want to want it. So they kind of chase it. They kind of work towards it. But if you said to yourself, I'm going to do this no matter what, I'm going to get to this point, you'd go through the same failures that you went through otherwise. You just wouldn't quit. You'd learn from them. Like, there's a big distinction there between, like, I'm going to do this. I am flexible in my approach, but firm in my goal, versus, oh man, it'd be cool if I was big and jacked. Like, everybody who's big and jacked has had the same struggles you've had. They just kept struggling after that struggle where you gave up.
What was a highest calorie meal plan you can walk us through? Do you remember like a peak moment where you're like, holy fuck, I'm consuming so much shit?
So I was getting ready for the Arnold Classic World Amateur Championships, which is a long name. Yeah. But it's a pretty big contest.
Yeah.
And I was doing between 9,000 and 10,000 calories a day.
Wow.
And so I'd get up, and there was he I think still has the world record in powerlifting for the deadlift at 1015, like 1,015, Benedict Magnuson. And his wife at the time put out a cookbook called The Big and Beautiful Cookbook. So everything was massive high calorie meals. So they had like this 5,000 calorie pancake recipe.
Holy damn. Shit.
So I'd half that and eat it for breakfast. I'd eat about 2.5 pounds of ground beef.
Wait, hold on, time out. So 5,000 calories for the pancakes. You'd eat half. That's 2,500.
Yeah.
Breakfast right out the way.
Breakfast
pancakes.
Gone.
Amazing.
Then I'd eat 2 to 2.5 pounds cooked weight of ground beef over the day with as much rice as I could handle on top of it. And then I'd throw like some frozen veggies in there, but I really didn't give a damn about that. And then at the end of the day, I'd do a pizza. I'd put more meat, ground beef, sausage, whatever on top. And at the end of the day, whatever I had left, I'd put 4 scoops of protein powder in a blender, milk, cream, ice cream, and cookies. Blend it and drink
Nice.
it. I was like, that's what it was. Like, it was just hammering food.
How many calories and how much protein is that usually?
Calories at that point, it would get up, like I said, between 9,000 and 10,000 over the day. Grams of protein, I was only around 400, which sounds like a lot, but at
only
10,000 calories, it's not that much.
Right.
What is your weight now?
Right now, I float in the 250s.
Would you say, I don't think a lot of people understand this. Once you gain weight and you maintain it for a while, it's like you might come down, but I imagine to maintain your weight now is not hard.
No, I'm cruising around like 250.
This is your new self.
Yeah, at 3,000 calories a day. most of the time, like, which is not a lot for a relatively lean, active 250.
No, it's not. And then did you move into, I know you took a break for a while from lifting in general.
Yeah. So I was competing I'd become a professional strongman. I was competing and I was starting to coach more professional athletes. So I went to Jackson Wink MMA and wrote a book with one of their strike coaches, came back, and I was coaching the number one cruiserweight on the planet in boxing at that point in time. I was going, like, what am I going to do here? Am I going to be the best strongman I can be? Or am I going to be the best coach I can be? So I felt like I had to choose. And right around that time, a guy named Mike Jenkins, who was a World's Strongest Man competitor, died at 30 years old. Like, died in the middle of the night. It was over. So I was talking to some of the other top strongmen on the planet, and they're like, yeah, it's a risk. Like, you run a risk. And I'm also talking at that point to some of the top coaches on the planet, and I'm 320, 325. And they're like, if you want to be competitive at the next level, you're going to need to be 365, 375.
Whoa.
I'm like, cool. How do I do that? And they're like, you're going to take the amount of testosterone you're currently using, you're going to 10X it, we're going to add growth hormone, and you're going to start taking insulin. And insulin really scared me. I was like, I don't want to die for this. Like, it's not an NFL contract where I'm thinking like, man, I can set my family, and I didn't have a family, I had a dog, but I can set my dog up for life, even if something happens to me.
What is the potential risk with insulin? I think people would want to understand.
The idea of a diabetic coma is a big one. The idea of going like severely hypoglycemic, and then potentially a coma. Like, there are a lot of risks with taking insulin, and it's not like a diabetic taking insulin where they check their blood sugar and take the appropriate amount. Your coach is like, I don't know, start with 8 IUs pre and post workout.
Just shoot
just shoot it and hope for the best.
Yeah.
Is that what happened to Jenkins?
I have no idea.
Oh, we don't know.
I have no idea. And I have no idea what he was using or not using. But there's a number of people who die every year in strength sports, including bodybuilding, who are relatively young, and it seems to be statistically abnormal compared to the average population their age. And I understand everybody always says there's a reason, and maybe there is. But to me, the reason seemed to be compounded by additional factors. And so
like just being heavier,
the stuff you're taking, a mix of those really. And I sat on it for a bit and was like, okay, I'm just going to be a coach. And I was probably in a 2-year depression after that.
like a coach for strongman or just boxing or?
I focused on regular people and fighters at that point in time. I didn't train any other strength athletes. And for 2 years, I was pretty depressed. I hated being in the gym. I hated being around weights. I hated all of it. So I decided I got to do something. So I went back to fighting, I went from 320, 325 at my heaviest down to 225.
Probably felt pretty good though.
I felt so skinny.
Oh, right. Yeah.
Oh, so skinny. I hated it. But I was fighting. I ended up running a marathon. I joined the military for a couple of years. I was starting to look for things to do differently. And with the military, my big thought was, I feel very disciplined. Like, I feel like a very disciplined person. And then I started thinking, am I just disciplined because I decide what I'm going to do every day? I work for myself. I do the sport I enjoy. Like, nobody tells me what to do. I do things that look disciplined, but I choose them. I'm like, how can I test this? Like, oh, I'll join the Army. Like, that's how we'll figure it out. So I did. And coming out of that, I slowly got a little bit of the bug back. Like, I miss being strong. I miss being more muscular. And so,
what do you think you took from being in the Army?
Disappointment. I took a lot of disappointment.
Why is that?
The Army, no disrespect to the Canadian Army, there's a lot of amazing people in it. I wanted it to be way harder. I wanted it to be so much
Burn.
Yeah, like I wanted,
That's an amazing thing to say.
I wanted to go in there. I wanted it to be vicious. Like I wanted it to be really goddamn hard.
So this was the Canadian Army.
Yeah.
And they're soft is what you're saying.
Yeah. My experience was fairly soft. I was disappointed.
You heard like a vacation for you.
You heard it here, Canada. You guys are soft.
So it's like a 2-year vacation. You're like, I'm just going to kind of do a little bit of work. And
yeah, there's some great people in the Canadian military, but man, I wanted it to be rough.
Give us more details. Like, what was soft about it, and what would have made it more rough?
So one of the things they started implementing in the Canadian military was your superiors weren't supposed to give you a punishment that they didn't also do. So instead of like the drop and give me 20, it's more of a drop and we'll both do 20.
Oh.
And that's really lame.
It's communism.
Yeah, for real. For real. Canada's got a whole host of problems. This not being top of the list, but it's on the list.
Well, now you don't want to discipline because you're like, do
Yeah.
I really want to fucking do push-ups?
It's like if
this guy's an asshole.
you had to put your kid in timeout, but you also had to go to your room.
Yeah.
This doesn't
Yeah.
make sense. You got 40 soldiers you're supposed to be looking at. You can't punish all of them.
No.
And to be honest, I thought the physical standards were embarrassing. Like most of the candidates coming in, or some of the guys I saw in, it was like these guys like 3 pull-ups,
Wow.
Jeez.
10 push-ups. So me and another guy who is now a high-level SWAT guy in Canada were
So basically like a normal infantry in the US,
yes.
if he's high level SWAT in Canada.
Well, he's pretty legit. He started to teach shooting now, like internationally. He's a really legit guy, and we're really great friends.
Oh, great.
Him and I met in basic training together, and we'd do things to make it harder. We'd stay up and train. We'd force
Nice.
the guys in our unit, like, listen, you walk in and out of a doorway, it's 20 push-ups. We'd add things to it. Or it was winter in Canada during one of these, and I was like, it's 20 kilometers, so 12, 13 miles to the barracks from my house. I'm like, I'll go the day before, I'll drop off all my gear, and then I'll run there that night. Like, I'll run in the snow, it's minus 10. I'll run there. So I'd start doing things like that. I was like, but I wanted it to be hard. I'm like, I want to see what I've got. Like, I want to get close. What is it going to take to break?
You want to get pushed.
Yeah. I
Do
want
you think you would have stayed in longer if they were pushing you
Yes.
more? Okay.
Yes.
So you left after 2 years because it was too easy.
Yeah, I was disappointed.
Okay.
I wish we had like direct entry like you guys have here with something like Buds for the SEALs. Like
Yeah.
that's what I wanted. I want to see how long I can stay awake, see how much I can handle, see how much it's going to take to break me physically, mentally, emotionally. That's what I wanted.
Yeah. So you get out now, and then you're like, what's next?
Yeah. Yeah, truly. I started just kind of looking at my life like, well, screw it. I guess I'm disciplined. I'm disciplined as much as I can seem to test it. And I started crafting the coolest bachelor life. Actually, let me back up. Before I did that, I decided my life was horrible.
Why? Why? Yeah. Why?
So I was moving my gym from one location to another, and they were decommissioning an old church in my city. So they were going to turn it into co-working spaces on top, and I decided I was going to rent the basement and move my gym there. So as I'm moving the gym, I'd take breaks and I'd go sit up in the church, grab a coffee and go sit there because I like the ambiance. Sit there and think. And I was sitting there and I was reflecting on my life. I'm like, man, like my life should be good. I've got no real problems. I've achieved the goals I've set for myself. I make decent money. It's low stress. Like things have been good from where I started. Like I was dirt poor as a teenager and a younger kid. I was dirt poor. I've made this business. I have a reputation. I'm good at what I do. I've trained pro athletes. I'm like, why isn't this so good? So I'd sit in this church and I brought a notebook and I wrote down every distinct area of life I could think of. So my physical life, my physical reality, my relationship at the time, where I'm at financially, where I think my mental development is at, my personal or spiritual, whatever. And I made a list and I took all the categories that mattered to me and I wrote out what I thought my ideal result in that area would be. And I closed my little journal and went back to work. I came up the next day with a coffee and I read it. And I was embarrassed because I read it and I looked at it. I'm like, most of this is a lie. Most of this is what I'd like people to think my goals are if they read this journal. God damn it. So I tried again. And it was a little more honest when I reviewed it the next day. And it took me 6 or 7 tries to get to what I thought was as honest as I could be with myself about what I wanted in life.
So you were going back, reading it, and you're like, I don't really want that. What am I doing?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. So yeah, that's
And
interesting.
embarrassed that I couldn't be honest with myself about what I actually wanted.
Right.
I was saying the things I thought people would want to read if they read my goals.
Mm-hmm.
And it really embarrassed me. It started to really rattle my self-image. So I finally got it to what I thought as honest as I could be. I got it as close to that as possible. And I was like, cool, I'm going to do this. So I ended a almost 4-year relationship. I started changing what I did with my time. I started learning different languages. I started changing how I trained my body. I started changing what I did with my money. I started traveling to different places. I started trying to live all of that. And that's essentially the big transformation that happened post-military.
And that leads you to Westside?
No, Westside started way back. So
Okay.
when
So you were doing all this during Westside?
So Westside, Well, let me break down the Westside story. So the Westside story.
Nice. See what you did there.
He's going to get a trademark infringement. Like, somebody's going to sue this podcast. Like, that's not the Westside story. So I was early 20s. Maybe I was 20 years old. And I was deadlifting, or more accurately, mid-shin rack pulling, which is a very hard thing for anyone who's done it. And I was using 650 or 670, somewhere in there. And I felt a pop in my right SI joint. So just above my right butt cheek. And it felt like warm liquid leaked into my body, which is alarming. It's an alarming feeling. And I was almost immediately in crippling pain. So I like drag myself out of the gym. I go home and I can't move.
No, wow.
Like I'm stuck in bed for days. So while I'm stuck in bed, I'm very upset, I'm Googling back injuries from deadlift, back problems with deadlift, like on and on and on. And I find one of Louis Simmons' books, the Westside Barbell Book of Methods. So I read it. I read the entire thing. And in this book, he's outlining, these are the problems with certain types of training. These are the injuries or issues that are going to come up. I'm like, that's me. That's me. 2 weeks ago, I had that thing happen. Like, this is where I'm at. So I read his book, and then he references a few other books. So I downloaded those and read them. And there were inconsistencies, I felt, with his interpretation of some of the ideas in those books. And back in the day, Westside printed the gym phone number in their books. So I called it. I left a message. I'm like, hey, my name's Craig, da-da-da-da. Click. And Louis Simmons sounds like this God figure to me at that point. So the idea of him calling me back seems insane. And then one day I'm in my car and my phone rings. And I look down, I'm like, looking at the area code. I'm like, oh, that's Ohio. I open it. He's like, hey, this is Louis Simmons. I go, this is Louis Simmons. He goes, yeah. I'm like, this is Louis Simmons. He's like, yes. I'm calling for Craig. I'm like, oh my God, Louis Simmons is calling me. He's like, yes, yes,
yes, you idiot.
Like, what is going on?
Well, real quick, I think, a lot of our listeners probably don't know unless you're like in the strength world and like read actual programming books and you're like super into it. Can you tell people maybe in one word or a sentence who Louis Simmons is?
Louis Simmons is the greatest. So Louis Simmons is arguably the greatest strength coach in the history of strength coaching. Louis Simmons' influence in the world of strength coaching. It'd be hard to find an NFL team who hasn't been directly or one step removed influenced by Louis Simmons' methods in almost any sport, in almost any Olympic sport, in world champions, in every sport, in powerlifting, absolutely. But the reason on it, for example, has sleds and has bands and has chains and has different types of barbells and has the inverse curl and the glute ham and the reverse hyper is all because Louis Simmons existed. His existence has shaped almost every gym anyone's ever been in, whether they know it or not, because of the ideas he sometimes invented, from some of the ideas he promoted, from what he did. He shaped strength and conditioning in North America. And whether people agree with him or not, he's influenced every aspect of the world of strength and conditioning in North America. I was a lot more than one word, but
yeah, he just, from what I have heard, digested all the rushing training models, like from way back when, just everything he could take in that was strength plans from the beginning of time was just in his mind.
Yeah, Louis was a human encyclopedia. It was incredible talking to him. He could remember every number, every study he conducted. Louis was a maniacal genius of strength and conditioning.
And that's why you were blown away. You're like, this guy
is calling me. We're on the phone.
Yeah.
And so he calls me and I'm like, okay, so here's my question. He's like, yeah. What's your question? I'm like, well, I read your book and I read these books. And he goes, wait. You read my book? I'm like, yes. He's like, and you read those? I'm like, yes. He's like, why? I'm like, well, because you referenced them. He's like, and you read them? I'm like, yes. He's like, both of them? I'm like, yes. He's like, how old are you? I'm like, I'm this old. What do you weigh? What do you lift? What are your squat, bench, deadlift? Da, da, da. He's like, cool. Do you want to come to Westside? I'm like, well, come to Westside? He's like, yeah. Do you want to come to Westside? I'm like, yes. He's like, great. When can you be here? And it's probably June. Yeah. I'm like, August. He's like, okay. Call me when you know what date. I'll see you in August. Click. I'm like, holy hell. I just got invited to Westside Barbell. I'm like, cool. And then I'm like, how do I get to Westside Barbell?
Yeah. You're in Canada at this point.
I'm in Canada. Right. And it's not a crazy drive. It's probably 6.5 hours from where I was living to Columbus, Ohio. But I have no money. Like, no money. I'm like, I got to get to Westside. I'm How am I going to get to Westside? How am I going to get to Westside? And I came up with the idea. I'm like, I'm sure other people want to know what happens at Westside. So I emailed every muscle magazine that I could think of. Like I went to a grocery store, looked at the magazines, took down all the names and emailed them. I'm like, hey, I'm a very articulate writer, completely made up, but I'm going to Westside Barbell and I'm down to write you an article about it if you'll send me $500. And this is my pitch because I worked it out. I'm like, I could stay at the cheapest Red Roof Inn near the gym for $39.99 a night. I need this much money a day for food. I need this much money for gas. I can get there for $500. And Muscle Mag hit me back and they're like, deal. We'll send you a $500 check. You send us an article when you're done. I'm going to Westside.
You're in.
And that's it. So I went down for my first week there and spent, 4, 5, 6 hours a day with Louis. I still have the notebook I brought to Westside, all the notes I scribbled out, and I still review it. And then from there, I came back to Canada. I opened my own gym with 2 partners at first, who we ended up splitting that off, and I kept the gym and kept rolling. But when I opened the gym, Louis sent me a care package, and then he basically gave me an open invite. Come down anytime, call anytime, and mentored me for a little over a decade from that point in my own training and the training with professional athletes. It was the first person to refer a high-level athlete to me. Louis referred the top triple jumper in Canada to come work with me directly, which was like Louis Simmons referred a client to me. He sent me a personal letter of reference. And when I got it, I put it in my safe and didn't tell anybody about it for 5 years. I just put it in the safe. Yeah. I'm like, this is the greatest thing I've ever had. Yeah. I hid it in there and never mentioned it.
It's gold.
Yeah.
One of my favorite stories is when Louis taught you the secret to deadlifting.
Oh,
How did that happen?
So I'm at Westside. It's my first time there. It's over that first week. And he wants me to sumo deadlift. And my best sumo deadlift at that point in time was like high 500s. It was probably right around 6 plates or 585 pounds for anyone who doesn't know what that means. So not amazing, but decent. And I pulled a small PR. I pulled, I think, 600 pounds. So I deadlifted 600 pounds, put it down. I'm like, this is amazing. Hit a PR at Westside. There was the current world record holder at that point, AJ Roberts, standing in the gym. And Louis comes over. He goes, good job. Put a 45 on each side. Louis, that's 90 more pounds. He's like, looking at me like I'm an idiot. He's like, yeah, I know what 45 plus 45 is. I'm like, this was a PR for me. He's like, yeah. Put another plate on each side. I'm going to tell you the secret to deadlift. This is what I'm here for. This is why I'm here. The greatest coach in the world is going to give me the secret to deadlift. I'm throwing the plates on. I'm like, this is the best day of my life. So the plates are on, bars loaded, ready to go. Louis comes over, slaps my arm. He's like, all right, the secret to deadlift. I'm like, yeah. Like, okay, the secret to deadlift. What is it? If it doesn't come off the ground, pull harder. Punches me in the front of the shoulder and steps back to watch. And my heart sinks. Like, I promised Muscle Mag this article. I spent every dollar I had to my name and that $500 to be here. And this is what I've got. Pull harder. I'm like, I know I'm supposed to pull hard. It's a deadlift.
Yeah. So
I'm like, God damn it. I'm going to fail this lift and then I'm just going to leave. I'm going to give it a half effort and I'm going to leave. I'm going to drive home, lick my wounds. This is horrible. Like, what a mistake. So I set up over the bar. I start pulling. It obviously doesn't go anywhere. And I hear him in my head. Hey, if it doesn't move, pull harder. I bite down, like push into the floor with my feet and hit it and hit the 690. And I cannot believe it. I can't believe this has happened. And I was talking to him afterwards and he's like, listen, sometimes you're not doing anything wrong. There's nothing to fix. You just have to try harder or do it more. It's like, God damn it. And I've used that advice in almost everything in life. I've told it to my daughters. I've repeated it to clients. I've repeated it to myself most of all, thousands of times since. Sometimes there is no fix. Sometimes there isn't anything you're going to do to speed up your progress. You just need to try harder. You're on the right path. Go harder. That's it. And it sounds so simple, but hearing it, being given that lesson, changed how I approach everything.
That's some damn good and easily transferable advice. To everything.
To everything. I've remembered that trying to learn Russian. I remember that learning Spanish. I remember that when I'm working on my own coaching business. I think about it with everything. Every area of life I've benefited from like, okay, how do I move this if I'm not moving forward as fast as I want? Is my plan optimized? Am I doing the right things? Do I understand my approach? And if the answer is yes across the board, just work harder. Just try harder. And it goddamn works.
Are there other key lessons from Louis that you've gotten from, I'm sure there have been over the decade that you've worked with him that have really shifted the way that you've done other aspects of your life?
Outside of lifting?
Yeah.
Yes. So the Conjugate methodology, which is what Louis is known for. So the idea with Conjugate exists in contrast to how people typically train. So in a typical training program, I'm doing a muscle building phase, then a fat loss phase, then I'm going to try and focus on getting stronger, then more athletic, whatever. And the idea there is as you push one forward, the other ones that you're not focused on fall off a little bit. So you've done your muscle building phase, you're as muscular as you've been. Now you're doing a fat loss phase, you lose a little bit of muscle. Now you're doing your strength phase and you're still losing a little bit of muscle potentially, and you're not as lean as you were in your get lean phase. Conjugate is the idea that you can focus on all of your goals and move them all forward if your plan is built correctly. You can move forward towards all of the things you want at the same time. And one of the ways you do that is by seeing how many birds you can kill with the fewest number of stones. So in a strength and conditioning perspective, if the thing that's holding me back from being more athletic or fast is a lack of hamstring strength, but one of the things I want to do is build more muscle, I can do that by adding in hamstring specific work. And one of the other things I want to do is get fitter. Then maybe I'm pulling a sled in a way that focuses on my hamstring strength, and all of those things start moving forward in a very simplistic, made up example. Taking that and applying it to real life and going, cool, I want to improve this aspect of my life and this one and this one. How do I do that at the same time? So I want to get more exercise in because I want to be healthier. I also want to connect more with my wife. I could go on a walk with my wife as, again, a very simple example. But taking the Conjugate, the last conversation I ever had with Louis was almost nothing to do with training and everything to do about how to apply Conjugate to your life. And in doing that, I've been able to make massive leaps forward in every area all at once. I can make more money. I can get in better shape. I can have better relationships. I can have more time with my kids. I can do all of these things at once by applying that type of thinking.
Dang, that's a very deep philosophy. I like that.
Yeah.
What were some of the other experiences or, I want to know what it's like to be in that gym. Like, what were you seeing and feeling, like the energy and the training environment?
Okay, I'll give you two stories that I think encapsulate it. So number one, my first day there's a 170-pound guy benching 700 pounds.
Holy shit.
So he's using a bench shirt, but that's still very strong. And I'm one of the sides.
Because it's like, what, another 50, 100? I don't know.
Even if he gave you 200 pounds.
Yeah.
It's monstrous.
Yeah, it's a 500 bench.
So there's 100-pound plates leaned against everything at Westside. One was leaned against the side of the bench. So he hits the 700 bench, racks it, and the 100-pound plate falls off, scrapes down my shin, lands on my foot. To encapsulate the environment of Westside, I pulled my knee up to flick the plate back onto back up to standing, which was kind of hard to do, even though I tried to make it look easy, and didn't react. So he's like, "Your foot okay?" I'm like, "Yeah." And when I got home, my Converse All-Star was full of blood. my foot was not okay.
Yeah, it could be hamburger. You don't even know.
Yeah, but the environment is like, you're good. Like the intensity is cranked up to 10. Well, the first day we were squatting, you start with a 65-pound squat bar. You had 100-pound plates for the first 3 plates on each side, and then you can add 45s. Like the intensity is amazing. And probably the other best example, I was doing a rolling dumbbell extension. So I'll describe this for anyone who isn't watching. You hold your arms straight up like you did a bench press with 2 dumbbells with your palms facing each other. You lower your thumbs to your shoulder, stretch your elbows back as far as you can, and then like you're throwing darts, you lift the dumbbells back up. And I'm pretty big and strong at this point. At Westside, I'm probably 280, 290 the first time I'm there. And I'm doing this with 70s, which I know is pretty good. Guy lays down beside me who weighs 185, so almost 100 pounds lighter than me, give or take. He does them with 120s. I'm watching this. I'm like, cool, okay, humble pie, no big deal. And he gets up and I'm like, bro, how did you do that? He's like, what do you mean? I'm like, you're doing 120s on a rolling dumbbell extension. He's like, by training at Westside. And it's just the environment. Like if I want to if I hang out with billionaires, I'm hanging out with Warren Buffett and Mark Cuban and Elon Musk or whoever, my perspective on what a lot of money is or what my daily routine is or what's expensive versus what's not is going to shift. If I hang out with Usain Bolt and his training crew for a week, my perspective on fast is going to shift. And I might not be Usain Bolt, but I'm definitely going to be a faster version of me than I would be if I just ran with guys like me all the time. Westside, same thing. The intensity and the results and all of that. It's like, hey, you're here. Like, this is the standard. So even if you're not going to be the best person here, like, even if you're the worst person here, you're going to be twice as strong as you would be if you weren't here. Like, the environment and the intensity is.
It makes sense. It's like, if you look at Arnold and golden age of bodybuilding, it's like maybe their programs are like this or that, but it's like sometimes it doesn't even come down to the program. It's like when you're around people at this higher level, you're going to unlock something psychologically that you would never get from training by yourself, ever.
Completely. It broadens your perspective to what's possible. To be honest, I think I wish I could have met me today when I was 20. So I could have been like, whoa, that dude's possible? Like, I could be that dude? I wish I knew that was a thing years ago. And Westside is like that. Your environment can be like that. That's part of the beauty of things like this podcast, of the access we have to where people are at. Before, the strongest you could be was the strongest guy in your city or your gym. The wealthiest guy you could be was the guy who owned 2 stores downtown. Now you're like, whoa, I could be this. I can see people with a Lambo. I can see people with the bodies I want, the life I want.
Well, it can totally be a double-edged sword because you see everybody's front page. You see the version of them that they want to put out. And it's so easy, I think, for a lot of people to feel discouraged by that. Like, oh, fuck, I'm so far away. I can never achieve that. But you can use the other side of the sword, like you said, like, oh, fuck, it is possible to not just be the guy that owns 2 corner stores, but the guy that has a Lambo, the guy that owns a multi-billion-dollar company, to see a 6'1", 150-pound kid to then look at you and say, I could look like that. I could be 300 pounds. I could be bigger than this.
Yeah.
Is insane. Because like my base weight's like 150. So for me to think like 300 pounds, that's fucking insane. Now I'm probably not going to put the same level of work in that you did in terms of becoming a strongman, but the fact that the body transformation is possible is incredible.
Just knowing it's possible. And to be honest, what you just touched on is one of my least favorite things about like this ultra positive circle jerk on social media right now. Like, don't compare yourself to anybody. Don't feel bad. Don't do like. Sometimes your personal criticisms that make you feel bad are completely on point.
Yeah, 100%.
And you should lean right into it.
That's your fuel.
Yeah, if you're looking at somebody, you're like, man, they're doing this and this and this. Like, oh, that makes me feel lazy. Or like, I'm not getting very far. Or I'm not making progress. There are some people who are very high achievers who beat themselves up and need to chill out. Yeah. Most people are not that. Most people, when they feel...
It's their perception of it, right? It's like the environment's the same. The trigger is the same. It's how do you take the trigger? Like social media is going to be there. You can't do anything about that. And you can either look at it and say, I'm going to use that as fuel, or you can look at it and say, oh, I'm a fucking failure. I'm never going to try as hard.
Yeah, I think that's what they've done to a lot of kids is they take all emotions, and there's some that are good and there's some that are bad, but it's just all energy. And it's like that feeling of like, oh, fuck, I'm not as strong. You can take whatever those negative feelings are and channel that energy. And that's actually the thing that's going to move you forward. And if you deny those feelings and go, oh, I'm fine, then there's no motivation.
Complete. And just sometimes you're right. I remember talking to a family friend. They're like, my son, I think he's depressed. I'm like, oh, well, why do you think that? And they're like, well, he just sits in the basement playing video games and eating junk food all day. And, he doesn't have a girlfriend and he doesn't really have a job. And, he graduated high school. He's not sure what he wants to do. And he's always talking about, being down on himself and he's kind of a loser. What do I do to make him feel better? I'm like, nothing. The kid's right. He's a goddamn loser.
Yeah, exactly.
What do you make him feel better?
Yeah.
I'm like, no, he's right on the cusp of realizing, yeah, I'm a loser. Like if you can simultaneously understand that if you can simultaneously take in the points where your self-criticism is correct and tie that to the fact that you do have the potential to change, that's the magic recipe. Like the points where you suck, you're probably right. Mm-hmm. Like somebody who takes their shirt off in front of the mirror and their stomach's jiggling and they feel bad about themselves, they don't need a positivity post on Instagram. Mm-hmm. Like they need the belief they can be better and then they need to go be better. Like that's a good cue. Yeah, you're right. Like that looks bad. Go fix it.
Yeah. The kid that's in his basement playing video games isn't depressed or like he's not playing video games because he's depressed. He's depressed because he's in there playing video games. It's the opposite.
Yeah.
The other way around. People just don't think about it.
Completely. And his idea that he's a loser isn't depression. It's a completely accurate representation.
Yeah.
Like, this is like Shaquille O'Neal being like, I think I'm tall. So we're like, oh, don't think that. It's like, stand in front of the mirror, repeat this mantra. I'm a normal height. I'm a normal height.
Yeah.
Like, you can delude yourself as hard as you want. You don't feel good for a reason, and you should probably listen to it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I wish in schools, I've thought about this. I'm like, how would you change a lot of the problems like 20-year-olds are having that are, I feel like a lot of people that are so obsessed with like gender roles and whatnot is because they don't feel any self-worth. And so they need to pick some kind of identity to build confidence. And I feel like if you started from the time kids were 5 years old in kindergarten all the way to like graduating high school, and you built a very simple, disciplined, but positive, like push-ups, sit-ups, pull-ups, just like basic kind of like strength training from a very young age all the way up, you would probably eliminate a lot of problems, depression, health, right? Because when I was going to school, we would do the presidential test and you do a flex arm hang, but we were fucking square dancing and playing pickleball. How the fuck was I ever supposed to get stronger unless, you know? So like if you made it fun and you just train kids almost like through a body weight strength calisthenics all the way up, I feel like you'd solve a lot of problems with discipline, you know, mental health, a lot of physical health problems. And you would, you know, I don't know, when you've worked with people who've trained when they were much younger, they're much easier to train versus like I've taken a tech guy who's never done anything. And it's like programming an AI bot that went into a human body. And it's the first time he's using the body. Like, remember that Men in Black were the bugs inside the guy's body? That's what it's like sometimes training these guys who've like never done anything. Like literally, they're like looking at you like, is this right? You're like, you are so disconnected, right? And I think you can
Craig
eliminate.
just calls them nerds.
I do. I use that.
Yeah, term,
But like-
it uses that term often.
If you just did like, okay, everyone, we, you know, it's like 30 minutes, like bodyweight squats, push-ups, and, you know, maybe some big kids use bands, other kids are strong, they do whatever. It's like, I feel like that would be amazing to put into schools.
I agree. I think what people need, whether it's physical or otherwise, is they need to pursue things that require delayed gratification and during that delay are uncomfortable. Because I would rather coach somebody who's been like a computer geek forever, but who has struggled to teach themselves how to do that well and built a successful business and gone through those struggles, who's like, yo, I got the money, I got this life, I got a wife, I got this, but I don't want my wife looking at the pool boy. I want to be jacked. Like, how do I do that? If they've been through discomfort, if they've learned to try hard over a prolonged period, they're going to be great at whatever. Same thing. You could take people who've been successful physically and start teaching them how to apply that mentality somewhere else. All I want are people who have struggled for something. I think the problem comes when people don't struggle for anything. I don't care if you want to be in shape, but you better, like, I think you're better. If you're rich and successful, but you're also in shape, you're better than somebody who's just rich and successful and not in shape. But I want to be around people who struggle for things, and those things are transferable.
Mm-hmm.
I was able to learn another language because of the things I learned in the gym. I was able to build a business, a successful business, because of the things I learned in the gym. And so my perspective is it going physical out. I think there's some advantages to transforming yourself physically that any other life transformation doesn't have. But the people who seem the most unhappy, the people who seem the most dysfunctional, the people who seem to seek attention by deciding they're a cat today and a gerbil tomorrow or whatever, all of them to me are people who have never struggled to attain self-worth. They think they can just, like, it's supposed to happen to them or they're supposed to pull it down and wear it. The people who have struggled for things in any domain are always superior in my experience.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, that's how the dopamine system works, right? It's like you have to aim for something, achieve it, and then you get the reward. And so much of society now, especially the younger generations, don't have any of that. Go hunt for something and find it. It's like everything's just gratified right away. And so then you're in the basement.
Agreed. And get some scars.
Yeah.
Like, interesting people, good people, strong people have scars from something. They've been injured by something. They've had to put in work at something.
Yeah.
Like they've had something fall on them, and they're always the best people to work with in anything, I think.
There was someone, I can't remember who this was, but they were saying that it was some famous person, and somebody wrote them and was like, I'm really depressed. I don't want to live anymore. I think I'm going to end it all. And the guy wrote back, he was like, okay, before you end it, can you do one thing? And then if you do this thing and you still want to end it, then go ahead. If you want to end your life, go ahead. And the guy said, sure. And he says, go get a 6-pack. And if you still want to, I can't say the magic word, Instagram will take our video down, but if you want to be unalived, right? If you want to unalive yourself after you get a 6-pack, go ahead. But I promise you won't want to. Just not even having a 6-pack makes you want to live, but the fact that you did something extremely fucking difficult to go get it, and now you have it. Now you have dopamine. Now you probably don't want to do that nasty thing, right? So that all comes back to delayed gratification, going after something, hunting, whether you're a man or a woman, like go be a hunter, go achieve something.
You have to be a delusional idiot to assume you're going to have this like great feeling of self-worth and satisfaction with yourself after not doing anything for it. Like after not actually accomplishing something tangible in some area of your life, to assume you're going to feel good about yourself makes you a delusional idiot.
100%.
I don't care how many Instagram reels tell you how good you should feel all the time. You got to go earn that in some way that's meaningful to you.
Dude, that's my big gripe with like confidence affirmations. Oh, I feel confident today. Or like, oh, do these power poses to feel confident. You know what makes you confident?
Yeah.
Fucking doing stuff. You are unconfident. That's the problem because you haven't done anything to earn the confidence. You're confident in things you're good at. Of course, you're unconfident in whatever X task you're doing because you've never done it before. You have to be okay being unconfident for a while.
I've had a few huge rants with some of the coaches at On It, like in a friendly way, like discussing it about imposter syndrome, which everybody wants to talk about all the goddamn time. Like, I don't mean coaches at On It want to talk about it. I see it online all the time. Like, hey, if you're dealing with imposter syndrome, part of me, like, maybe you're a goddamn imposter. Maybe you are an imposter. If you're trying to help people get in shape and you feel like an imposter, you probably are.
I remember people would say that to me and it never made any sense. I was like, just the terms, like, what do you mean imposter? Like, you think you just all of a sudden switch over and go, I'm amazing at this. You're always, you should always be like feeling like, I want to get better. I want to get better. I want to get better. And then one day, Louis Simmons, you're like 60 years old and you're like, maybe I kind of know some stuff. It's that desire to like think you're not enough and keep pushing it. You're just switching like, oh yeah, I'm amazing. Like we're like imposter syndrome as a podcaster. It's like, no, you just fuck around and find out.
Yeah, in most things. And you need a healthy balance between like pursuing the edges and trying to improve. But if you feel like an imposter in something, you should probably ask yourself why you feel that way. Like, well, I don't actually know what I'm doing. Like, cool. Maybe you shouldn't do it right now.
And then you can go learn that thing.
Yeah. But the solution to imposter syndrome is not to just tell yourself you're not an imposter and listen to a feel-good video.
Yeah.
Like, you should probably figure out where that's coming from.
More delusion is not the solution.
No.
Oh, that rhymes. That's the new tagline.
Yeah, that is a beautiful tagline.
Yeah, also narcissism. You're just like, I'm fucking amazing and I should feel good about myself.
Yeah, and that's what, I think that's where so many problems come from. And it is wild to me watching it happen. Like, most people don't need to tell themselves to feel better or write a sticky note on their mirror.
This is the first generation that's ever had to do that.
Yeah. Everybody else was too busy actually doing stuff.
Exactly.
Like you have to go get some evidence. Go get some actual evidence. And if you've collected a bunch of evidence and still feel horrible about yourself, go talk to somebody then. Go find a therapist. Maybe you do need help. But if you don't have any good evidence to why you should feel successful or why you should not feel like an imposter, then you should probably collect that before you worry about how you feel.
That's a good way to analyze it.
Yeah.
Like, do I actually need help? Or is there no proof? Like, am I actually doing nothing and I don't deserve to actually feel better and actually have a real conversation with yourself?
Completely. Like, it'd be like if somebody said there was obese person syndrome, which they probably do. But let's say they call it obese person.
Excuse me, Craig. I identify as an obese person, so I feel really offended by that.
I got to tell you guys this real quick. Sorry,
No.
Brent. There's a meeting of queer over
Oh,
obese
did I
people.
send you this?
Yeah, I think
I sent it to you.
It was an Instagram reel. It was like 5 people on Zoom, and there's this young white kid, and he's like, I identify as a queer obese person, and they're like, he's like, oh, no, I do. Like he stayed committed.
He's like a skinny kid.
Yeah, it's so fucking funny.
But that's it. So take that example. Let's say some of those people in there, let's pretend we live in a society where we can agree that being massively obese isn't good. Like let's pretend we live in some crazy world where it's not great to be enormously fat. And you're enormously fat.
How dare you make an assertion like that?
You're enormously fat. You look in the mirror. You're like, oh, wow, I think I might be really fat. Maybe I have a syndrome. So you go on Instagram and you're like, oh, no, I don't. I just need to repeat these mantras. I am healthy. I am thin. I am in shape. I am fit. You don't have a syndrome. You're right. Your observation was correct. The imposter syndrome, same thing. You're looking in the mirror and you're this giant obese person. You don't need a mantra. You need to go fix it and find some evidence of that. Like maybe you are an imposter. Maybe you are a phony. There are tons of them. You could be one.
Yeah.
Find some proof for yourself. And that's what you use to build confidence. That's what you use to build self-esteem.
Funny thing about mantras, they don't fix congestive heart failure. So it's not going to do much for you.
They don't fix anything. Yeah. Most people have low self-confidence because they deserve to, because they lie to themselves constantly and on some level are aware of it. And they continue to do it because Instagram coaches think it's a great idea. And they wonder why underneath they feel worse and worse and worse. Yeah. Tell yourself the truth. Like the average fat person who wants to lose weight, I cannot imagine how many lies they tell themselves on a given month about, I'm going to start going to the gym here. I'm going to stop eating this. I'm going to wake up at this time. I'm going to go for a walk. I'm going to do that. They tell themselves a million lies, as do people who are unsuccessful in every area of life. Fat people are just easy to pick on because they're visible.
Yeah, and they can't catch you.
For real.
Yeah.
Slowly walk away. You're going to be fine.
But yeah, you're not seeing failed entrepreneurs in their bank accounts. You're not seeing
you can't see
failed relationships.
Yeah. It's just in your face when you're very fat.
Completely.
So it's a good example to use.
So it's very, very visually obvious. But in all areas where people aren't succeeding, they're telling themselves lies. Mm-hmm. So of course they have poor self-esteem. Of course they have a bad relationship with themselves. If I told you that I was going to meet you for 10 days in a row, I told you I was going to meet you at 7 a.m. and I never showed up. And then 10 days later, I told you every day, okay, I didn't do the 7 a.m. thing. I'm going to meet you at 4 p.m. at this time. Or for 10 days in a row, I told you I wasn't going to eat the lunch you put in the fridge. And I lied to you that many times. How many of those would it take before you stopped wanting to be around me? Mm-hmm. It wouldn't be many. If I let you down that many times, you wouldn't want to be around me. You wouldn't have confidence in our relationship. People do this to themselves constantly. And then we present to them online like the solution is to somehow just tell yourself you deserve to feel better. You know you don't. You feel exactly the way you deserve to. Exactly. You've earned this feeling, but you have the power to earn a new feeling if you want. And it's entirely under your control. But you earned this. You got this one.
Yeah. I love your method of having the evidence. That's a great way to put it because it's just following the scientific method. It's like, can I prove this theory wrong? If not, it's a hypothesis. Mm-hmm. Okay, got it. Now do I have evidence? Okay, now I have a theory. If I can't prove it wrong, then it's true. It's the same thing. Do you have evidence to prove that you are a confident person in this arena? No? Okay, well then you need to go collect the evidence. And if you have the evidence and you still feel bad, then yes, you probably have a mental condition that needs professional help.
Yeah, or maybe you just need a hug.
Or maybe you need a hug. Yeah, maybe
you're burnt out.
Maybe it's trauma. Yeah, something is there.
Whatever, but the evidence is it in every area. And that doesn't mean that everybody has to be, that doesn't mean that anyone has to do the things that I think are important in my life.
Right.
But the things that are important to someone in their life, what are those things? Do you have evidence to support that you care about these things? I say to people, I get into arguments sometimes with people about what they say they care about. And I always like to use the idea, if an alien were to watch you for a week who doesn't speak English, like they can't understand anything you're saying, they're just watching you, what would they believe you care about? If they were to make a list at the end of the week, you say, well, I love my wife and I'm trying to provide for my family and I want to be healthy and I love my kids. An alien who watches you would be like, I don't know, they like some weird square box mounted in their living room. They like these weird glass bottles and they drink a bunch of them and then walk funny, and they stare at this little rectangle with moving pictures all the time. Those are their priorities in life. If an alien believes that about you, you should feel bad. Or you should determine that these are the things I actually care about and live in congruence with that.
Right.
The bad feeling isn't good or bad values, in my opinion. The bad feelings that people have come from a lack of congruence with what they believe is important versus what they do. And the more you can align those, the better you'll feel all the time. The more confident you'll feel, the more confidence you'll have in yourself, all of that.
Have you heard of the say-do ratio?
No, but it sounds interesting.
It's that exactly. It's how often do you say the thing you're going to do? Or how often do you do the thing you're going to say? And can it always be 100%? Not always, but you aim to get it as high as humanly possible. And the lower your say to do ratio is, the less congruent you're going to feel, the less confident you're going to feel. And that's why so many people are, in this state where the alien that's watching them thinks something completely different than what they say. So yeah, they're going to feel like shit.
And should. And the amazing part about all of that, because I think people take it very negatively most of the time, as soon as you realize that that's how it works, it's in your control. And people might not like that feeling because then you have to own it. But if you want to fix it, you have to own it. Like that's the other issue, I think, with how often in our society we give away control over what's happening. Because if you don't have control over what's happening when it's negative, then it's not in your capacity to fix. If it's not your fault that it's bad,
that's huge.
It's not in your power to fix. And so you're just going to float along. Like you have to accept those responsibilities that don't feel good because that's your power then. It's my fault I feel this way. Cool. Then what am I doing or what can I do to stop feeling this way and start feeling a new way?
Which is the most empowering thing you can do to somebody.
Yeah.
Is that it's your fault, but you're in control by admitting that.
Yeah.
Even if it's like all the evidence says no, it's like still just, it's my fault. I'm going to figure this out.
Completely.
That's huge. All the negative feelings come from the weight of responsibility of you realizing that you can now change it.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's big, dude.
That's where all the negative feelings come from, but that's where all the power comes from too.
100%.
And it's magic.
With great power comes great. What?
Responsibility.
Yeah.
Dang, is it really an hour already?
Oh, fuck, it is an hour. Okay, well, I think we can go a couple extra minutes because I have one question for you.
I mean, I got a shit ton, but yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we could probably go 2-3 hours.
Fire them. I'll do as fast as I can.
All right, you have to come back because
we'll do an episode 2 with Craig.
Yeah, there was a bunch of MMA like styles of training, recommendations for like BJJ guys, strikers, Yeah, I'm just curious about you and even just working with fighters, how you plan strength and conditioning and like, because it's so new to that world.
Absolutely.
And I want to like workshop that with you.
Deal.
Yeah. So that's a little teaser for episode 2.
Yeah.
All the spores. That's what we call our listeners, are the spores of the fun guys. So before we go, I'm really curious. There's a documentary of Westside on Netflix.
There is.
But you've had the pleasure of seeing behind the curtain.
Yes.
Obviously. Now, this isn't the main question, but are there stories that you can't tell us about Westside?
Yes.
Okay. So barring those, what's one of the most insane things that you've seen at Westside that you saw and you were just like, holy fuck, what is going on here?
I watched a guy at Westside squatting with 800 pounds on the bar, 500 pounds of additional band tension on top.
Holy
come out of the bottom of a squat with blood trickling out of his ear. And I loved it. I was like, I'm going to get so strong one day, my brain can't handle it. That is one of my favorite, like, mini moments at Westside. The other, if I can give one more.
Please.
Like,
Yeah.
Less cool, maybe. I hate the Westside documentary. I felt like it did not portray Louis, to my understanding of him, at all.
That's good to know.
Louis Simmons was one of the most generous people I have ever been around. I showed up at Westside. He knew I had no money, like as soon as he got talking to me. The number of meals he bought for me, the amount of clothes he gave me, the amount of gear he sent me when I opened my own gym. Louis was the best in the world. And you couldn't buy his help. There was no amount of money you could show up at Westside with to get Louis' help. He either wanted to help you or he did not want to help you. And if he wanted to help you, he gave you everything he possibly could with asking for nothing. And if he didn't want to help you, there was nothing you could do about it. You could be Jeff Bezos. If Louis was like, no, this guy's a dork and I don't like him, he's not helping you. You'd be like, how about $1 million? He'd be like, how about you get the hell out of my gym? He was profoundly generous. And his generosity is something that has has given me a career in this, has taken me to the highest levels of coaching. Like I was coaching the third strongest man in the world, the fourth strongest woman in the world, the world heavyweight champion in boxing, the number one cruiserweight on the planet. And these are just some I can list off the top of my head. The amount of opportunity I've gotten through doing that has been profound. There's a Netflix documentary that's supposed to be out this December that I'm featured in as a strength and conditioning expert. And the reason I was able to be in that is because of the spark that Louis lit with me and the education that started with Louis at Westside. Like Louis is as close to a saint as you could bring out of the strength world, in my opinion, all flaws included. He was an incredible person.
Wow. Well, that's a beautiful way to end the episode. On the high note, rest in peace, Louis Simmons.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, right.
Hey, man. Craig, thank you so much for coming, dude. That was one hell of an episode. I'm excited for round 2.
My pleasure.
Yeah. Fuck yeah. Let people know how they connect with you, the things you're doing online and in the gym.
So you can find me on Instagram as the Conjugate Cowboy.
Yeehaw.
You can find me on YouTube as Craig Bongelli. And I don't know, if you want to find me some other way, show up at On It and ask for me. Don't be a weirdo. Like, those two are enough.
Awesome. Thanks,
My
brother.
pleasure.